The range of economic development initiatives represented in this room, especially those involving microcredit, get down to the grassroots of lives in villages and neighborhoods, and microenterprise development, and all of the other credit union-related strategies. Each of them, and others we could name, begin with a recognition of the strengths and skills and capacities and values and experiences of local villagers, of people in local neighborhoods and cities, of community residents. What's the starting point? It's the full part of the glass represented by people who sometimes are not thought of having any fullness. Each of these approaches brings something powerful and unique to the development, effort, and discussion, and we're exploring that in these wonderfully rich 3 days together. And each is flexible enough to be customized to a unique setting. So there's not a one-size-fits-all ABCD, there's not a one-size-fits-all appreciative inquiry, there's et cetera, et cetera. We understand that each community is unique and that we need to first listen and then adapt. So whether north or south or urban or rural, we're trying to figure out how the approaches which have the half-full part of the glass as the starting point might be adapted, and what we have to learn from each other. What an exciting conversation that is, right? A second dimension of this imperial growth of strength-based or asset-focused approaches applies to the individual lives of ourselves and our neighbors. Many of you know that the ABCD mantra always is, and it's not the ABCDs alone, but it is, everybody is gifted and everybody gives their gift, right? Giftedness and contribution. That mantra is being applied more and more broadly across the lifespan. We recognize increasingly the incredible energy and capacity of young people, not to be problems, but to act as powerful contributors to community building and to healthy economies. And on the other end of the age span, in many societies, we are rediscovering, some societies have never lost this, ours has in the United States, we are rediscovering the eagerness of older adults who wish to continue giving their wisdom and experience and power to both community and economy, and everywhere in between, from the first squall of a baby out of the womb to life on the deathbed. We're understanding that there is giftedness there, and how do we open up to receive that giftedness? In addition, on the individual level, of course, creative community builders all over the world continue to uncover and mobilize the gifts and capacities of individuals who have been labeled deficient and pushed to the community's margins on the basis of that label. It is so heartening and so exciting to observe the reconnection to productive community and economic opportunities on the part of labeled folks. Canada has been a leader in teaching the rest of us how to think about people with disabilities as people with abilities and seek ways to connect those abilities into increasingly hospitable communities, not dominated by professionals interested in treatment, but by ordinary folks willing to relate to their neighbors as neighbors. Or we've been watching the emergence of a movement in the United States, and we have more to do here than most of you in the room, of people coming out of prison, labeled ex-convicts, who have been marginalized and labeled and pushed aside, and we have now many communities in my own town of Chicago and across the country who are trying to welcome people coming out of prison who are often in there for very, very minor circumstances and convictions back into community. Our colleague Mary Nelson at Bethel New Life here has a program in a very low-income neighborhood in Chicago for people, thousands of people coming out of jail every year, called Welcome Home, it's called. And how do we welcome you home? We recognize you as a person with gifts to give. And we're going to find ways to make that happen. Or we're watching young people who had, one of my favorite terms, labeled at risk, right? Have you ever known a young person who was not at risk, right? I have not. I certainly was myself. My kids were. But we use the label, at least in the United States, to put some people in a category, right? So there are people now who are doing creative and wonderful work with young folks who have been labeled at risk to say, well, okay, we all are. What can you do? What are you passionate about? What would you like to contribute? And our friend Peter Kenyon, that you're going to hear from in a little while, does this work not only in his home country of Australia, but across the globe in very, very powerful ways. We're seeing now a little bit, not enough, of action redefining and re-welcoming new immigrants in the United States, and more of our countries are facing immigrant populations who are a little bit strange. We don't know them. They speak different languages. They come from different backgrounds, but isn't it possible? One of the cases in the From Clients to Citizens book is about a wonderful experiment in Minneapolis, St. Paul in the United States that recognized that new Latino immigrants from Mexico and Central America might have had a life before they came to Minneapolis. They might know how to do something. They might have a contribution to make, so can we open up our community and allow them to make that contribution? We're even dealing with people we're dealing with people labeled frail elderly, right? Older folks whom we tend to discard and label as people who need treatment and constant care, but what they really need is to be taken seriously. My own father, I think, died before he should have of a feeling of uselessness. And my own feeling is that the leading cause of death among older adults in the United States is uselessness. So that the practice of discarding the elderly leads to death. And finally, of course, we're working constantly with people who have been trapped in poverty and labeled, therefore, as people with no contributions to make. And of course, that's entirely wrong. And there are lots of ways in which figuring out what the skills and capacities of people in poverty are brings them back into both community and economy. All right? So at its most effective, asset-based community development and all of its sister approaches encourages strategies which build strong communities by including everybody. Nobody is labeled as primarily deficient and therefore pushed to the margins. Everybody has something to give, and everybody will give their gift. Finally, in addition to the geographical spread of the asset-based approaches and its effect on individuals in a bunch of different cultures, it's clearer and clearer to us, I think, that we're witnessing empirically a kind of advance of the asset-based community development idea into the worlds of some very large and powerful institutions. Here's a big challenge and a huge opportunity. A few brief examples. John talked about these a little bit this morning from a different point of view, but more and more evidence indicates that safe and secure neighborhoods in cities are the result not of increased numbers of police. You can add police till the sun goes down, nothing happens. But safe and secure communities are the result of active and connected local residents. Do people know each other? Do they come out on their porch? Do they talk to the young people on the corner? Do they come out to plant community gardens together? Are they visible in the community? As a result, new partnerships emerge between law enforcement and community residents. Community policing continues to spread, and sometimes it's taken seriously.